and welcome to Adobe Live. We'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we're creating and streaming from today and pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. My name's Flynn. I'm very lucky to be the host today because joining us is James Barnard, logo designer, freelancer, design educator, dad, and owner of Barnard Co. Hey, what's up, James?
How's it going? Thank you for that intro. It's good to be here. Really appreciate you letting me do this. Looking forward to getting started.
Yeah, me too, man. It's so great to have you here. I've been following you for a while, so I'm glad that we can come along. So I discovered you from Instagram, but I know you have like lots of followers on TikTok and stuff like that with these tutorials. And the reason I followed you is because there was about 3 things in a row that I saw that I actually didn't know about Adobe Illustrator. Here I am working for Adobe, and I'm like, oh my gosh, English accent, but turns out you were in Queensland, and I'm like, okay, we've got to get James on and share his knowledge with the people. So I'm very excited to geek out with you.
Thanks very much, man. Yeah, I've had a bit of an explosion of followers on Instagram lately. Just completely lucky. I had a couple of videos go viral. But yeah, I mean, like you say, a lot of people are getting a lot out of those Instagram tutorial videos about Adobe Illustrator. And there's always something you don't know in Illustrator, isn't there? It's one of those things where it's just such a massive application that there's a few little tips and tricks in there that you might not have seen before. So hopefully people are getting a bit out of that content. But hopefully as well today you might see a couple of things that you didn't know how to do.
That's it. I mean, that's always the lovely thing about watching someone else work, because often there's a little bit of like, hey, what did you do there? Was that a little shortcut? A little bit of a sneaky sneak?
That's it. That's it. There's no substitute for watching other people work in Illustrator. It's just one of those things where if you just keep an eye on other designers and watch other people's workflow, you'll always learn something. So yeah.
That's it, especially for freelancers and people that might not be working in a studio or have that experience in a studio. You don't get that kind of over the shoulder, oh, hey, maybe I've got a better way to do these things. So, and if it's your first time joining us here on Adobe Live, there might be a couple of new people here. We are live. So if you have questions as we're rolling along, we're here for an hour. This is a part 1 of a 2-part series that we have with James. So the first is today and the next one's on Thursday, and we're just going to hang out. Let us know where you're from, what's up, and what you're interested in learning. So James, other than my short little intro, can you give people a bit of a background of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. I'm a freelance logo designer. I'm actually from the UK, but I emigrated here in end of January 2021, right in the middle of the pandemic. My wife's Australian and we met in the UK. Exactly. So yeah, followed a girl, and she basically had the call of home. She'd been in the UK for quite a long time. So we came back early 2021, and right in the middle of the pandemic, 2 weeks of quarantine in a hotel in Brisbane, which I
good times
on my worst enemy, with a 2-year-old as well.
Yes.
She's now 3, and my wife's since had another one since we arrived. So we have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. So I'm a freelancer / dad, juggling, freelancing at home, / being a father with the kids playing downstairs. So it's not always easy. But yeah, a freelance logo designer. I've got clients from all over the globe, mostly from the States lately because of the sort of the social following of TikTok and Instagram. Lots of clients are coming from there. And so, I just basically put together logos from my small studio in Gold Coast, Queensland.
That's beautiful. Well, congratulations for surviving the emigration here. 2 weeks in hotel quarantine. Yep. Well, that's great. Well, I think we have some of your work as well, which we'll bring up before we jump in. So I'm going to share that. And I was just mentioning just before we started the stream, I really love this array of colors that you have spread out here.
Thank you. Yeah, completely fake. Just did that for the presentation. But this is like a sort of amalgamation of a few things. So there's some client work in here, but there's also a lot of conceptual work. So I do a lot of live streaming on my Instagram and my TikTok profiles, and it's not always easy to do logo design as part of a live stream because it's obviously there's a lot more involvement. There's a research phase, there's a conceptualizing phase. It takes me 2 weeks to come up with a couple of versions for my clients for their logo options. So I tend to do kind of conceptual based stuff on my live streams, and that's what we're going to do today, is taking a slogan, reducing it down to a graphic, and then working it into something like a t-shirt or a sticker. So for instance, it's something like this, don't wait to be asked one, incorporating a question mark into the hourglass is something that I might do on a live stream. So this is what we're going to do today. We're going to take a slogan, something cool, something inspirational, and we're going to reduce it down into a badge or a sticker or a t-shirt that we can actually put a piece of type around and come up with some kind of cool design for the central element of that design.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm super excited. Let's roll.
Do you want me to crack on?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay, cool. So coming up with the slogan for today, I actually put some feelers out to the Instagram and TikTok audiences, and they came back with loads of great suggestions, none of which I've used. Sorry about that. I wanted to get a kind of sort of the nautical theme in there today, and I found a lot of slogans about the sea, like a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor, or anyone can hold the helm when the sea is calm. But they're all a bit long for this kind of conceptual slogan-based design work. So I just nicked one from none other than Jack Sparrow.
Right.
I love this.
Go straight to the source.
Bring me that horizon. Okay, it's such a exactly. So honestly, this slogan, it just kind of sums up so much. It's such a great when you're starting a project or you're about to go off on a journey. What a great slogan! Bring me that horizon. It's like kind of like an old way of saying send it. It's like a kind of inspirational, means a lot of things. And so I thought let's try and bring this into a sort of reductive design. So I worked out some sketches. Now my sketches are absolutely terrible. This is one of the things I think differentiates me from my competitors, is that I suck at sketching. And I only usually really
these are great
sketches. Well, yeah, I worked hard on these, obviously, because I'm presenting to you guys. But the two on the left are actually in my, my field notes notebook, which I kind of just got from Aaron Draplin. That's another story. We'll talk about that another
Beautiful.
time. So the two on the left are actually part of the from inside the notebook, and I used Adobe Capture to bring them into Illustrator. Obviously, because it's grid paper, it sucks because there's actual grid lines on the one on the right. So the one on the right is actually vectorized. You can see it's actually turned into a vector using Adobe Capture, but because it's on grid paper, it's useless. So we're just going to use this as a guide.
Because it's converted everything to vector, right?
Exactly.
Like
if you switch to outline mode, it's just a mess of it's just completely unusable. So we're going to use this as a guide only. Now, some people like to take sketches in and actually trace over the top of them. I'm not going to do that today. We're going to just work from scratch. We might bring this little sketch up and put it in the corner just so we can use it as a reference. But essentially, this is a ship's wheel cut in half. The top section of the ship's wheel is going to show the horizon. So if we can, I'm going to try and make that central bar of the ship's wheel into a wave. So it actually represents the wave of the sea. The bottom section of the design is the actual ship's wheel itself. So we'll be using a bit of radial repeat in Adobe Illustrator to bring that to life. And then in the top section, inside there, we're going to put the sun, use a bit more radial repeat to do those rays out the top, and then maybe put some birds in there, sort of flying in the background. Then we'll try and bring some type into that design and just wrap it around neatly into a badge using a bit of type on a path. Maybe draw a little anchor as well to fill in those gaps. And if anyone's got any suggestions for for fonts as we go, that's fine. I'm a massive fan of Futura. I will be falling back to that if no one suggests anything better. But we can go in there and we can explore some different options as well.
It's a classic for a reason. Before we just jump into the design part, we have our first question. So a reminder, you can throw your questions in chat and I'll ask James. So here's one to kick off. By conceptual work, do you mean personal work, or is that another category entirely for you?
Yes, I do. So it's ideas that I've had that haven't been done for a client. They're just done to basically show off my skills, right? I've actually got logos out there in the design world that have been published in books that weren't for clients. In fact, some of my best work is not for clients because, it might be an idea that you've had that you just want to bring to life. And I do this on my live streams all the time. So you might see in the background, there's a few designs here, and a few of those are from from concepts like the EE one there and the neon behind me. That's actually a rejected client logo that wasn't used for a client. I ended up giving it away to a client. And things like the Suno wave there, the one with the sun and
Yep.
the karmic, not all conceptual stuff that I just came up with by myself. They ended up being used for clients, and clients ended up kind of purchasing from me separately. But I like to do that sometimes, just to kind of, if I've got a good idea, or if a client has a logo design that they've rejected, just goes into a bank of work that I can then use to either just to enter into things like awards, or books, or even for other clients, down the line. If an idea doesn't work for one client, it might work for another one. So it's you never throw anything away. Just keep an arsenal of your work behind you, and you never know when you're going to be able to use it again one day.
That's cool. That's great. I like it. And yeah, thanks for the question.
All right, nice one. All right, so let's get cracking. I will pull this sketch over to. Actually, I'll just bring it straight over to the second artboard. Before we start, I've just got a massive Illustrator file here with I think it's 28 artboards, all arranged neatly in a grid, just so it's just working from with a white background. Now you can change the background color of Adobe Illustrator to white. Some people like to just use one artboard and then change the background color to white and work in the space. But I like to use the keyboard shortcuts, Command 1. To sort of bring that artboard full screen, or Command 0, sorry. And I've also, just so you know, if you see me zooming in and out of the screen quite smoothly, I've got a Logitech mouse here, MX Master 3, which has a scroll wheel on the side, which I've set up for zooming in and out. So if I zoom in and out of the screen easily, it's this button here. So it's got sliding in and out of the screen like that. Okay.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, it's pretty handy. Okay, so my terrible sketch is up in the corner. Let's just have that on screen there. So we're going to start just by building this ship's wheel. One other thing to note before we crack on is I'm using a keyboard. I sound like I'm sponsored by Logitech here. I promise I'm not being paid for this. This keyboard has buttons across the top that I've put these terrible little sticker labels onto.
Oh, I love these like custom labels you've got on
Absolutely. There. Yeah, little macros that I've put into Adobe Illustrator. So one of these is expand. I'll actually do the working as we go through, but expand, unite, save for web, so it's export selection. This is the one I'm going to use all the time, though. This one, center align. Okay, so if I press this button here, it's going to vertically and horizontally center something to the artboard. And then the final one here is mirror and copy. So if I flip a design over quickly from one side to the other, I've pressed this button. It's just copied something and flipped it over. But I'll try and talk through what I'm doing as I'm doing it. But yeah, if you feel like I'm being a bit of a magician, that's what's happening.
That's cool.
All right, so let's build out the ship's wheel. So we're just going to grab our ellipse tool. We're going to draw a wheel in the middle of the screen. And like I said, I'm going to press that button on my keyboard, boop, boop, and it goes right to the center of the screen.
I love that.
Pretty easy to start with. Okay, so we're just going to try and match up loosely the wheel to the design. So now I think I'd like to work in inverse on this design, because it's much more sort of versatile, especially when designing stickers or t-shirts. Sorry, lighter t-shirt colors aren't as common, so you can print onto things like blue and black and dark green and dark red with a white vinyl, which I'd like to do quite a lot. So what I think I might do actually before we get going is just bring my layers panel over. I'm just going to put a dark background behind my design, and then we're going to work in white on top of dark. Okay, so it's going to make things easier when this design is actually printed onto a t-shirt. And if I work in dark and then go to light, some things like shadows and highlights aren't going to work. So it's best to kind of start that way, and then we'll know that this design basically works in white when we print it to a t-shirt.
That's a really good tip. I like it.
Yeah. So basically, I've put the background on the background layer, and I've locked that with the padlock there. So now I can't muck around with it. Now everything else is on this artwork layer. So that's loose, and I can now start to design on the screen. So I want to create basically a series of shapes and strokes to design this wheel. So if I just if I invert this by pressing Shift and X, and that changes the stroke to the outside, and we're going to make that white. I'm just going to bump the stroke up. There we go, and we're going to start to build out this ship's wheel. So I can take that shape and press Command C to copy, and if I press Command F, that just pastes the shape exactly in place. I don't know if you need that shortcut, Command F. It's really handy.
My favorite, yeah. But for so many years, I never used it until we were doing streams here, and then I thought, oh my gosh, I've wasted so much time.
I know, just pasting, like when you just paste something like that and it goes off to the side, and you're like, well, I need that in the middle, so you just paste that over the top. So yeah, copy and Command F. And especially when you're creating designs with radials and like things originating from the center, it's super handy. Now, straight away, we've come into a problem. When I scaled that stroke up, the stroke scaled up with it. And it's because I've got my scale strokes and effects checkbox selected in my properties section. So I'm going to uncheck that. And that is now, when I scale up my strokes, it's going to keep the stroke width the same. So if I just delete this layer, this ellipse, copy, and then Command F to paste over the top. And now when I bring that up, it keeps the stroke weight the same.
That's cool.
Okay, now, right, let's build out our little ship's wheel. So looking at our sketch, we've got a dark section in the center, a white border, and then another dark ring around the outside. And then we're going to do another one around here. I'm going to bump up the weight of this one so that it looks like the sort of the bar inside that ship's wheel. And we're going to play around with these stroke weights and to make sort of shadows and highlights from this design. Let's just bring this down a bit. And we'll get that looking roughly right. And then I'm going to bring this second one up, paste that over the top. I'm going to do the outside wheel. So that's keeping the same sort of, this would be like the wooden section of the rig. So the wood's in white here, okay? And the black background is what we're going to see through the wheel. Right. So when we're creating highlights and sort of shadowed sections for this design, we're going to use the black as the kind of the shadowed area.
That's cool that you're thinking about that from the very beginning of like building.
I find that really handy when it's so handy with t-shirts because, you know, I wear a lot of black t-shirts. It's slimming, it makes me look slimmer. And when I print these designs using something like a Cricut machine where I cut the vinyl out, it's always good to be able to work in sort of the inverse. So I've got a logo here for this guy, Mike Reed, is a chef here in Australia. This is obviously one that works really well on light backgrounds, but when you're creating a dark version of that, you need to think about where the shadows and the highlights are. So if I was just to, you know, invert that design, obviously it wouldn't work. So you have to think about that sort of straight away when you're doing designs on dark.
That's cool.
Okay, cool. All right, so we've got the sort of basic shape of our wheel. We might change the actual dimensions of this now, but what I want to do in this design, the horizon is the sea. Okay, so this is wave appearing across the middle of the design, and I want to use that wave as the handlebars of the wheel. Okay, so we want to start from a point where the wave is sort of symmetrical from the middle. So I'm going to draw a line from the center of the design out past the point of the design, pretty much to where I think the handle's going to be for that wheel. It's going to bring the stroke weight of that down so it's not overpowering the design too much. I'm going to go to Effect, Distort and Transform, and Zigzag. That's going to bring up our little panel here, and by default it's going to corners, so we're just going to change that to smooth. I think we want to do, so we've got the center point of the design is the top part of the wave, and on the outside we're going to make the outside round off, so it's actually the handlebar. So I'm going to, I think that's okay actually, 10 pixels. So just to bring that up, you just increase the pixel value to change the sort of the amplitude of that sine wave. We just want a subtle wave in the design.
And what's the shortcut you were using then to make it go up? Magnitude.
So shift and cursor up goes up in values of 10. It's the same when you're moving around your artboard there. And the number of ridges per segment is the number of waves within that design. So if I shift those up, you'll see it gets nice and wibbly wavy, but way too many. We just want 4, so that we've got the start point of the wave is in the center of the design. We've got a couple that go inside as the sort of the wood through the design, and then on the outside we're going to round that off so that it's going to sort of tail off into our handlebar. Now immediately, if we press Command and Y and go to our outline mode, that line isn't actually a wave. It's an appearance effect applied to that line. So we can't really do too much with that in terms of manipulating path points, because it's actually just an effect that's applied to this design. So we need to expand that effect. So we go to Object, Expand Appearance, and now that line is actually converted into a wave. So we can actually now start manipulating this. So first thing I'm going to do is duplicate that down by holding down Option and dragging with Shift so that it keeps it in line. Grab the edge, hold down Shift so that I can rotate and it snaps to angles. And we're going to snap that to, oh, too many times. I didn't do it. There we go. Why is that not done too many? I need to reflect that across the vertical axis. So transform, reflect. There we go. That's better.
Yeah.
Too many segments. Okay, cool. So that is basically how we want the sort of the handlebars of this ship's wheel to look. Now, looking at this now, the wave is actually quite steep. So we're having to make this sort of bar in the middle of the design a bit too wide in order to show the sort of center of the bar. So what I'm going to do is just select them both and just grab one end and just shrink it down a little bit, just so that wave's not quite as steep as it was. And I'm going to bump this down just a smidge. All right, if I group those together with Command G, we're going to center them vertically to the design. And obviously, because I'm working in the artboard, everything that I'm selecting is actually aligned to our artboard here at the top rather than the selection. So when I center things vertically and horizontally, it goes back to the center of the circle, which is always good.
Right. And is this something that you will often do when you're creating logos?
Yep, absolutely.
Or lockups or symbols or anything like that?
Keeping absolutely everything centered to the artboard is, you know, it's a huge part. And even when you're bringing things like sketches behind the artwork. So let's say I wanted to draw over the top of the sketch. I'll draw a circle in the middle of the design, bring the sketch over to match up where that circle is, and increase the size of it to get it to the right sort of place. Then lock that background sketch and work from the center of the artboard as the reference point. It's really handy. All right, I'll just move this out of the way again. Okay, so I've got our path points here. I'm just going to stretch this out a little bit because I want to round off the handle where that last path point is here. And it's sort of, I don't like this shape at the end. So I'm going to just delete those last two path points with the direct selection tool, which is A. Press delete. I'm going to get my rectangle tool. And just from the top of here, I'm just going to draw a rectangle to match up with the bottom one. And I've obviously got smart guides turned on, so it's all matching up. Just going to stretch this out a little bit. I'm going to delete that left line because we don't need that. So I'm just using the direct selection tool to highlight that line. Press delete. Now I'm going to select the two corners on the right hand side, and using the rounding corners tool, I'm just going to round those off. So now we've got a lovely sort of beveled edge to our wheel.
That's coming together.
Yeah, all right, so it's in the right place. So now I can actually just join those path points up to where the design was. So this is actually sort of still separate to the design, but I want it to be a whole shape. So I'm going to select those two path points with the direct selection tool, press Command J, and just join those path points up. So now when I move them away, it's not a separate shape anymore. It's actually connected to the design. Okay. Now let's select this bar. We're going to press Shift and X. It's going to invert the stroke to a fill. And I'm also just going to, with my Pathfinder tool, I'm just going to make that a full shape by just pressing Unite. And now it's just connected that end in the middle because it wasn't connected before.
Right.
Okay, so now I can sort of manipulate this a little bit and just get the handlebar roughly where I want it to be. And we can do things like add details to this handlebar. I'm going to get this this bar looking as good as I can before I repeat it around the sort of ship's wheel. But we can always make changes to it later. But I'm just going to bring it to the back of the design. And I want to fill this circle with black. I'm going to start to sort of hide the design now with the background, with the wheel in front of it. So let me just grab this, copy it, press Command F, shrink that down. I'm just going to change that to black. And I'm going to bring the white stroke in front. Now you can sort of see there's a bit of a shadow coming on the inside of the design. So we're sort of creating a sense that that wheel is on top of the the handlebar there.
Right.
Should we call that a handlebar? Is that what it's called, do you reckon? The handlebar.
What do you call that? Handlebar?
I don't know. Like an access point.
I'm sure it has with everything nautical, there's like a
it's
specific
probably called like
word.
a spivet or something like that, isn't it? I have no idea what it's called.
There's sailors in the chat just like screaming into their monitors.
If you're a pirate and you're in the chat right now, let us know what that's called. And I'm just going to take that black line again. I'm going to copy that Apple F over the top. We're going to be using that a lot, and just fill in that gap there, just so that we're now starting to hide that this sort of spivet from the design.
Johanna, I got a job for you. Can you please find out what that specific thing is called?
Google it. Thank you, Johanna.
Because otherwise we're going to do 2 streams in a row and we're going to call it something different every time.
Yeah. Okay, so you'll see if we go to Command Y now, we've got a few lines appearing here. So some of these they're all strokes at the moment. Now we could be clever and use offset path to add more strokes on the outside of strokes, so that we can create that effect without adding too much detail into our actual design. But it just gets a little bit wieldy when you're making tweaks and changes, and I kind of just like to keep it freehand for now. We can rasterize and sort of vectorize everything towards the end. So let's take our spivet, our handlebar, and we're going to add a little bit of detail to this now. So in our sketch, we've got these little sort of detailed sections of the handle. It kind of creates this wood effect, but in a kind of one color format. These little lines on the outside of the bar. So I'm just going to start to add those to the design. I think I'm just going to do those with straight lines.
And so you mentioned one color kind of solution to give the illusion of something. So is that because of printing or like screen printing, something you just try to keep in mind for the most simple version of a logo?
Yeah. It's well, I always start with a black and white version of a logo, because if it works in one color, it's going to work anywhere. And with any logo design project, you have to provide a one color solution, so that your design works when printed in black and white on like a letterhead or something like that. So I always start in black and white, and then I'll add color at the very last step of the design. We may even add some color to this design on Thursday if we get enough time. But at the minute, I'm just thinking about being able to print this onto something like vinyl for a t-shirt. So I'm thinking in black and white at the moment. So let's just try and basically create the sense of texture and style with one color wherever we can. And if we have time later on, we can always add a little bit of color to the design. So I'm just
we could have guessed this, but they are called spokes.
Spokes, obviously. Dope.
Of course. There we go.
Spokes on a wheel.
Makes sense.
Thank you. All right, now I've got something to refer to them by as we go through this design. So I'm just adding a little bit of detail around here, like you would see on the kind of like a wooden lathe, or like like a stair post. There's little details and highlights to this spoke. Okay, I'm liking this. Let's just do a little. I'm going to just use the pen tool here with P. Select point there and hold down Shift to draw a line across. Now from the middle of here, I'm going to hold down Shift and just draw a line up, just to create this little highlight effect on the edge of the design here. And I think I'm just going to round the corner of that, the edges of that, the caps of that stroke with this round cap on the stroke panel, just to keep everything a bit smoother.
Is that something you almost always do within logo design, rather than keeping kind of the harsh edges?
It depends on the type of logo. Some logos call for it, especially things like architects or anything that's kind of like a geometric design. It helps to have straighter edges and more harshly defined edges. With illustrative stuff, it's nice to just create a little bit of softness with, by rounding the design off slightly. Now we can add a little effect to this with our uniform panel here. I like to just go with the width profile 1, and it just creates like a little big to small grade on that little highlight there. And I'm going to duplicate that down and just take that top path point off. So now we've got a straight line version of that in the middle of our spoke.
Cool. And that's just a stock standard ships with, Illustrator
Yeah,
thing. That's nothing fancy. Yeah.
nothing fancy at all. It's on the stroke panel when you select it, right next to the path point. You've got width profiles here, and there's loads of options. And obviously, you can change these as well with the width tool. So if you select the stroke and press Shift and W, it brings up this little sort of cursor change to the design. If you hover your mouse across where the path point is and start dragging out, you can create widths within this sort of stroke panel as well.
It's almost like playing with the mesh tool a little bit there. Like
a little bit,
yeah.
And you notice in the profile that's changed up here to match that width profile, and then you can set that as a profile, and you can save it to apply it to other designs, sort of as and when you go. I'm just going to put that back where it was and bring down our stroke width to match the other one. I'm just going to copy the. Oh, 1 second. I'm just going to copy that other one by pressing the eyedropper tool with I and just sample the one that we did before just to match the stroke width there. Cool. All right, so we've got our spoke designed. I'm just going to select it all here. In fact, if I just grab that bit and then we can just deselect by holding down Shift so that we're not selecting the wheel as well. I'm going to press Command G to group that together, send it to the back with Shift Command square bracket left, and that sends it to the back of the design. Now we can start to rotate this around our ship's wheel. So if I select the spoke, I go to Object, Repeat, Radial. Now that's automatically repeated that in a horrible little thing. So what I'm going to do is use my magic keyboard shortcut to vertically and center align that. I'm going to double click inside this design, and as I move one instance of this wheel, it's going to change them all.
Very
so I
cool.
can now position this back to where it was. You've seen this before, though, Flynn, haven't you?
I have, but from years of it not existing this way, it still always makes me happy to see.
You used to have to do that, one at a time, or rotate it around using the transform tool or something like that. And if you ever made a change to it, you'd have to make a change to every single instance of it.
You had to repeat the action, basically.
Exactly. Now, this is it's done a lot of the hard work for us by automatically defaulting to the right number of instances and the shape. But this little handle on the right-hand side here, if you slide that up and down, it will add more or decrease the number of instances. And we're going to use this again later on when we're creating our horizon inside the ship's wheel. You can also change this at the top left of the screen here, radial repeat, just by using the cursors to go up and down. But we're going to use 8, so we've got a nice reflective pattern around the design, and it also has now joined up that wave that we've got along the top. So inside this ship's wheel, that wave is now there, so we're going to use that as our horizon for the design.
That's very cool. I'm just going to jump in with one little thing here, like give you a break. You can have a drink of water as well while I just talk rubbish for a second. But I love the mathematical build. So you showed the pen tool. You've used lots of different tools, but I absolutely love and implore people to build particularly logo design and everything out with a mathematical approach. What I mean by that is the zigzag wave. You could probably pen tool freehand that pretty well. But when you're building it out, because you did it, you know that everything you've built and the foundation of what you've created is mathematically perfect, right? And I just really love that when you finally come to bring in the wave portion of it, you know that what you've built is perfectly aligned, it's perfectly mirrored, and it's flows perfectly. So
it also means that you have as few path points as possible within this design, right? So that when you're cleaning up the design for the client at the end, you know that the ellipse is 4 path points with the right number of handles connected to it. You know that everything in the design is kind of as simple as it can possibly be. So it just means a cleaner file for the client at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I'm already seeing now that the handles of the spokes are looking a little bit bulbous. I'd like them to be just a little bit bigger. So what I can do is if I double click on that one instance and then grab the all of the path points at the end there, I can now drag this out. And you see it just changes it to all of
them.
I can just smooth that, bring that out just a little bit. And then obviously with the direct selection tool again, we can double click on this one. A little highlight here, just to show you as I move it out. Press escape, and then it commits to all of those. So that's nice. So we've got a lovely looking ship's wheel there, I think. We can add a little bit of detail to this with things like the nuts that secure the spokes to the actual wheel itself. I'd also I think I'm just gonna bump up the stroke weight of that outside ring just a little bit, just so that when we zoom out of the design, we're still getting the shape of the ship's wheel is still there. That's a kind of a common trick in logo. You zoom in and out of a design just to make sure that it works in a on a small scale. Okay.
Very nice.
Now, again, with our little nuts that we're going to secure this to the design, we're going to just draw an ellipse in here. That's an enormous stroke width. So we're just going to bring that down to 40 or so. Even more. Change it to black. There we go. Now we've got our nut that is securing the spoke to the wheel. And once again, we're going to keep this separate from the spoke design because it's on a kind of different layer. The spoke is behind the design. Our nuts are going to be on top. So I'm going to do a separate instance of this using the repeat tool. So object, again, repeat, radial. It's done the same thing. We're going to center the design. We're going to double click in. I'm going to bring our nut to the outside of the design. That's too slow with my keyboard. So I'm just going to slide that out using shift.
And that keyboard shortcut sure is coming in handy.
It certainly is. It certainly is. Okay. Now I want to even add some more detail to this outside ring. So I'm just going to bump the weight up of that a bit more. And then inside the design, I'm going to just bring that shadow because this is like a thicker piece of wood. So it's going to create a bigger profile on that design.
I like that you're thinking about like what is it in the real world? Like this, okay, this is behind, so it has a shadow, even though it's like flat vector artwork for a logo. And you were talking about the bolts or the nuts. You're like, okay, well that needs to be a separate layer because that's actually in front. It's interesting to kind of think about it in that sense when you're building out something like this.
It creates a sense of realism as well, and that's actually something that's not easy to do in one color flat design. So the more we can do to kind of bring the design to life by adding details and highlights like that, the more realistic it will look and the more kind of reductive the design will be. So that it works in a one color format, but yes, it does look like what it's supposed to look like. That little rounded section there is getting a bit close, so I'm just going to slide that over a bit. Okay, save. Okay, let's do a few more little highlights to this design. So in my sketch, I've got some little sort of curved portions. It's sort of like wood grain, but again, it's quite reductive. I'm going to try and do that inside this design just to create the sense that this wheel is wooden, like we've done with our spokes there. So I'm going to copy the black shadow there. I'm going to copy that and press Apple F again. Shift Command right square bracket to bring that to the front. I'm going to bring the stroke width of that down to 10. And we're just going to shrink that down. So I've got Shift Option selected here. So when I shrink, it shrinks from the center of the design. I'm just going to bring that between the nut and the outside edge of that ship's wheel. Okay, let's have a think here. If I rotate, actually no, I'm not going to rotate it. I'm going to delete the left hand path point of this circle. Okay, that was with this direct selection tool. And I'm going to use that width profile again on that little grain edge there. So now it's just kind of creating that little highlight to the design. It sort of, says that this isn't a chunk of white plastic. This is a piece of wood, right? This is actual. And now I can, because I've deleted that path point, the center point of this design, if I was to scale this up and down, it wouldn't match where it's supposed to. So I have to scale from the left edge because it's now in the sort of center of the design. So I hold down select the right hand edge of that bracket and hold down shift. And now when I scale it, it scales to the sort of from the center still.
Right.
So I could just bring that out slightly just so it's almost touching the edge. Okay. I'm going to do that on the other side. So I'm going to select our this sort of shadow stroke again, copy, and Command F, bring it to the front. Eyedropper tool with I and select the outside edge so it's the same width. Now I'm going to rotate this circle 45 degrees. So hold down Shift, Just rotate it 45 degrees. That leaves 2 path points there and there. So what I'm going to do is just delete that path between them. So now we've got this kind of, it's a bit further around the circle. And then I'm going to put exactly the same width profile on that design. So now we've got a kind of...
That was a neat trick. That was a neat trick.
Yeah. So we're chopping out a quarter of the circle rather than half the circle, and I just did that quickly just by rotating it 45 degrees, so that we know that we've actually got.
It's great, like changing the points so it's 45 degrees instead of the others. I really like that. I have to ask you a question that's slightly off topic. So Alessandra asked a while ago, but I want to make sure we get the answer before she has to jump off. What was something that was hard to adapt during the pandemic in terms of freelance, and something that you were grateful for?
I was lucky with the pandemic. Well, let's say lucky. It was at a point in my career where my freelance career was taking a bit of a pivot. So I just become a father. My daughter was born a year before the pandemic, and I was also a stay-at-home dad. So my career took a massive, was a bit of a back burner. And prior to, I niched down into logo design maybe only a couple of years ago. Like, I'd always done it as a kind of a side hustle thing, but in terms of actually becoming a fully fledged logo designer, that's actually something that's quite sort of new to me. I had a lot of design clients on a sort of retainer basis. So when the pandemic hit, I immediately wasn't allowed to go into offices. I wasn't allowed to go to agencies anymore and work on a day rate. I was, suddenly having to do everything from home. And it meant that I had to kind of, my business had to pivot as fast as possible. And so I watched every single video that Chris Doe made about the business of design.
He was set up in an interesting position for everything, wasn't he? Just launching everything about a year before the pandemic. So yeah.
That's right. I honestly just watched all of his YouTube videos, took notes, and decided to sort of change tack. I niched down into specific logo design. I guess part of the sort of graphic design spectrum, and turned my business into a fully fledged logo design operation. Sorry, just what I'm doing here is I double clicked into that nut, and I'm now just duplicating that instance of that nut into this central section here. I'm just going to bring the straight weight of that down. Now we've got our nuts on the inside panel as well. Sorry, the question was logo design in the pandemic. So I niched down right in the middle of when everything was kicking off and people weren't being allowed to leave their houses, and it was really kind of just kind of like the right time. And then I moved to Australia, and then I got here and was like, okay, I moved from London, and what they pay for graphic design in London is a lot more than what they pay in Australia, funnily enough.
Yeah.
And I was kind of
panicking about
a little
2.5 times more,
probably. Yeah, it was quite a stark difference. Yeah, I reached out to a few agencies when I arrived in the Gold Coast, and lots of people were keen to work with me, but not so many keen to pay me. So I was kind of panicking a little bit, and I basically just I increased the amount of work that I was doing towards kind of setting up my business as a logo designer. And off the back of that, I started doing a lot more on my socials. So I was very lucky that I got a couple of my logo designs accepted into a book called The Logo Lounge. And I made a video about, those logos being accepted into that book, and it went viral on TikTok, and my TikTok following just exploded overnight. And so in an attempt to try and sort of capitalize on the hype train of TikTok, I made loads more videos about being a freelancer and software tips and the case studies for clients. And they've just been really, really popular. People seem to get a lot out of them. So my social profiles just exploded. So yeah.
And presumably that's led to more client work and exposure and things. Yeah.
Well, that's all about positioning yourself as the expert within an industry. So you are, by doing this kind of work and by doing more work as on my social platforms, I've actually clients are starting to see me as the expert, because I'm teaching younger designers how to do the work, but I'm also putting case studies on there and showcasing how sort of professional I am to work with.
Yeah.
So yeah, it all comes back. It's so self-serving. I mean, obviously I'm helping people, but I'm totally getting loads out of it because my clients seem to absolutely love it. All right.
Sounds like a win-win.
Yeah, totally. I wholeheartedly recommend giving back in the form of videos and graphic design advice to other people, because it just comes back around to you as a freelancer. Cool. All right, our ship's wheel's looking pretty good. Unless we've got any feedback from anyone, I think I'm going to move on to the next part of the design.
That sounds great.
I may just bring out the this outer edge slightly and just leave us a bit more room to play with in the middle there. Not by a lot. I'm just going to select the outside wheel and just expand that out slightly, just so we've got a little bit more room to play with inside the design. And then the beauty of obviously radial repeat is that we can just kind of bring that out a bit and give us a bit more of a handle to play with. And I can double click on these little wooden bevels, slide those out as well.
Very cool. In terms of feedback, yeah, lots of people just saying it's really great, coming along. And then I think also using the radial tool as well. Maybe a few people weren't aware of that. So that's and how you can go back and edit it. So it's that whole idea of being able to make changes on the fly and working in as non-destructive way as much as possible.
Absolutely.
Annika says this is great advice, giving back to the community 100%. Annika, streamer in the house. And Johanna said this is beautiful.
Oh,
so
yeah.
She wins the pun game.
You should be a dad with those dad jokes. Good job. It's really, really good, isn't it? Okay. All right. We're pretty much there. So what I'm going to do is Aaron Draplin, vectors are free. We should have been doing this all the way along, but I'm just going to copy that over to another artboard.
And then there was a comment before as well. Someone said, you mentioned Aaron Draplin a little bit earlier. Is he an influence/inspiration of yours?
Oh yeah, he is. Massively. So I'm very, very lucky to have a friend who was at Adobe Max and picked up a load of Draplin swag for me. I don't know if you can see this on the camera.
I can bring it up.
I have a signed copy of
signed field notes
from Aaron. Yeah, with it's the James brand. And he's written James, hell yeah, Aaron Draplin. So, and I got a load of stickers from him as well. It's absolutely incredible. He's a
very cool.
Huge influence of mine. Huge influence. I try not to copy him too much because it's very clear when you've done a design that's similar to Draplin's.
Right. Yeah.
He has a very, very specific style. This is why I worry about using Futura as much as I do, because he uses it all the time. So I've just
a lot of people use Futura. I think you're pretty safe.
Yeah. All right. It's one of those fonts I use far too much, and I do it all the time in my live streams. It's kind of good because it means that my slogan designs and the conceptual stuff, which you saw before, are all. It's very clear which ones have been done as a concept. Futura. So yeah, it's. Sorry, I love it. I absolutely love it. Okay. So we've got our wheel pretty much there now. Okay. I'm just going to delete that duplicate we made because we changed it. I'm going to copy it here. I'm going to select that artboard, press Apple F, so it's in the middle of that artboard. So if I need to bring it back later on, I've got it in the right place. Right now, so in the sketch, we've got the top part of the design is the sun peeking over the horizon with some sun rays appearing inside the design, and the wave itself is sitting over the top. So we kind of need to separate the sun section of the design from the wheel. So what I want to do is I want to copy that wave across the top and bring it to the front of the design to kind of half the wheel, so that we can then actually see the sun peeking out from behind that half. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the double click on our initial spoke, the right hand side of it. I'm going to copy that path, and I'm going to press Apple F again. I'm going to change this to pink as a pink stroke, just so we can see it on top of the design. All right, now I just want the top half of it, so I'm just going to delete the path points from the bottom there, and I'm going to delete this one as well.
And I'll just let you know and chat know as well. We've got about 5-6 minutes left for today.
Okay, cool. So we may not get to this section completed, and maybe next time we can go through, bringing this to life in terms of putting it inside mockups, and actually finishing the design off with some type and some extra detail.
Yeah, and for those of you just joining us as well, like this is part 1 and we're doing part 2 on Thursday. So whatever we don't finish, we're going to jump back in on Thursday. So don't miss that one.
Cool. All right. So as I mentioned before, I've got my lovely keyboard with mirror and copy. So with that path point selected, I just press that one button. Yeah, my lovely masking tape.
Looks like you're holding a boombox right now. That's like the nerd's boombox.
From the 90s. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so that's reflected across the horizontal. So I'm just going to join that up to itself in the middle of the design, and I'm going. Oh, why did that not snap? I think I just must have slipped. Let's take those 2 path points. Do you know what? I'm just going to bring that up out away from the design quickly. Select the 2 middle points for the direct selection tool and press Command J to join them together. And then I'm going to bring that line back to where it should be. Snap it back.
And you use outlines for that, so you quickly turn on outlines to make sure that it's perfect.
Command Y, that's right. Command Y brings the outline mode in Illustrator. So, and it's also handy for selecting things that are behind the design. So I can't, maybe for instance, I can't quite reach the stroke that's behind, the shadow that's behind this design because there's some stuff getting in the way. That's actually true. I can't get hold of it. So what I do is I press Command Y, and there it is. Now I can select it, and I can, I couldn't select it. Zoom in, and now I've got hold of it, thanks to the outline mode. So yeah, it's really handy to finding your way. You know, when the design starts to get quite complicated, it's always accessible. All right, there's our wave. Now I want to separate this from the background. So I want to actually, what I think I might do. Oh no, this will work. So if I just make this black, and I can bump the stroke weight of that up. And now this is going to create like a sort of a separated section to the design. But the problem is at the minute, it's kind of sitting on top of where the spoke is. So it's kind of blocking the design. And the problem with this is the spoke is behind the wheel. The stroke of the wheel is actually needs to be behind the shadow so that it shows up. So we need to bring a portion of that wheel to the front. So what I'm going to do is just copy that. Actually, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to copy this background section again. Copy that. Escape to come out of there. Apple F to paste it over the front. Flip that over. We're going to unite those together. So we can do that with our Pathfinder tool, or we can use the Shape Builder tool, which is Shift and M, and just select them and join them up together.
I was wondering if Shape Builder was going to make an appearance. Yeah, I love that, right near the end.
Of course it is, just in time. And let's just bring the stroke weight of that up. And we're going to make the stroke on the inside of the design just by pressing Align Stroke to inside. Now this is going to separate the shadow from the design. Now I can't get hold of it because my shadow's out of the way. I'm just going to nudge this up just for now so that we can get hold of it again. Bring this up. And where's our outline again? Send that to the back. And then we'll bring our stroke to the front again. And then I can take this path point, delete that one. Actually, no, we can't, can we? Because it's going to lose the inside stroke. I think what I'm going to do is turn that stroke into a shape. So I can go Object, Expand Appearance. And now that stroke isn't a stroke anymore, it's a fill. And now I can use the Eraser tool with Shift E. Just delete that section there, delete the section on the right, and then delete the bottom bit. And then this will separate the design. So we're creating a separation between the bottom half of the wheel and the inside section. And then once we're done with this, we're going to flatten everything and then bring in the sort of basically cover the design from the inside here. I'll just do that quickly just to show you what we're going to do. And then obviously we'll set up for Thursday.
Cool. Sounds good. We've got about a minute and a half left as we jump down. While you're doing that, so yeah, we'll be back on Thursday. If you're in Queensland, like James is, it's 12 o'clock. If you're in Sydney, it's 1 p.m. If you're somewhere else in the world, I don't know what time it is, but it's the same time that we were streaming today. And we'll be, jumping into part 2. And thanks everyone for joining us.
Nice one. So there's a little bit of work to do there, but basically that we've created the space in the middle of the design now for where our horizon's going to go, and for where the rays and a couple of little other details. And then we'll bring in some type to wrap the design up, and then we'll bring in a couple of little details so that we can just turn this into a t-shirt design or a sticker.
That is awesome. And it has been so much fun. I've been loving watching you work, loving the shortcuts, little bits of advice here and there as we go along, freelance advice, obviously lots of little tool tips and things like that going on there. And I love how far we've gotten just in single stream. Annika throwing out the times, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Thank you very much, Annika, for sorting out for our North American friends. I really should have written that down somewhere. Only been doing this for 4 years. Thanks again, James. It's been great.
No,
I'm really looking forward to Thursday.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, we'll get this all solidified, and hopefully at the end of the session we can do a bit of Photoshop work and turn this into some mock-ups as well. Perfect for showing off for a client.
That sounds awesome. All right, everyone. We will see you on Thursday. Thanks, James.
Thanks, guys.
See you later.